Hi, my name is Dr. Betsy Nesbitt Wagner, and I have the joy of talking to you today about mentors and mentoring. This is something that is near and dear to my heart, and something that's been a large part of my life for close to 20 years now in a formal capacity. And what I'd like to do today is talk with you a little bit about the role of mentoring, how to choose a mentor, the difference between an informal and a formal mentor, and share with you a little bit about my experience with mentoring as well. So, some of my background professionally is that I am both a therapist and a counselor educator. And from that background, I'm really passionate about this idea that we are only able to know ourselves fully when we see ourselves in relationship. It's important to understand who you are and how you're wired, whether that's your Myers-Briggs type or a different kind of personality type or an Enneagram number or any of those fun ways of understanding who you are. But the reality is we see who we are when we interact with other people, when we engage in other relationships, and we see how we're similar as well as how we're different to other people. And it's in relationship that certain aspects of our personality comes out stronger, gets sharpened, or gets kind of softened because we find that it's not as well received as we would have hoped. So relationships are really important, and intentional relationships are really important because they reflect back to us what we're showing the world, while also imprinting onto us aspects of the people with whom we surround ourselves. And mentoring is a way of choosing who you will let be your mirror and who you will seek out to intentionally imprint upon your character. So beyond, this we're talking about this in mentoring, but this also holds true just in terms of our friendships. Our friendships are important, who we let in. But mentors have a slightly different role in that we have, um, on some level, looked to them intentionally to say, you know what, there is something about you, there's something about the way you do life that I want in me and in the way I do life. And so, mentorship and a mentoring relationship is this purposeful engagement to cultivate something new or growing within ourselves and to learn through the experiences of someone else that we choose to let in. So, um, I often think about this of like when I choose a mentor, I think about like someone I look around and go, oh, I want to be like you when I grow up. And that held true at 20, and that holds true at 39. And I know others that has held true for them into their 60s and their 80s, that they still look around and go, who do I want to be like when I grow up? Because we're always growing, we're always developing. And I think another way of doing that is there's other times I've looked for a mentor and said, I want to learn to embody that aspect of character, personality, worldview, something like that in my life that I see demonstrated in their life. There's other times that I look for a mentor where I see somebody and I go, in this particular way, you're ahead of me in life. And I'd like to learn from you how to get there too. So all of those start with some level of recognition of where I have a place to grow, where there's something in my life that I need to learn more, grow into more, cultivate, develop. It starts from a place of humility and a place of teachability that says, I don't have it all figured out. I don't need to have it all figured out, but I do have a responsibility to proactively pursue growth. And part of my proactivity is to find people who can walk with me because they have walked this journey ahead of me. So, how we then choose a mentor is some of those questions. I look around and I see somebody that is ahead of me in life in some aspect. Um, but I also need somebody who is willing to be real, to be open, um, to be vulnerable about the good and the bad, the hard and the lucky in their life. Someone who is willing to listen and ask good questions, not just talk. Although, as we just said, they need to be willing to be real. So they got to talk on some level. And someone who can help me become more of who I am rather than seeking to make me just like them. So it's this interesting tension between I want to look at somebody and go, man, there's something in you that I want in me, and help me learn how to cultivate that. But a good mentor is going to look at you and go, you know what? This is how it worked in my life, but you're different from me. And I can share with you how it worked in my life, but let's talk about how that might play out in your life and what that looks like given your personality, your relationships, your spirituality, your resources, your circumstances. So, a good mentor has the ability to be self reflective without being self imposing onto you. So, when we also talk about mentors, we need to distinguish between informal mentors and formal mentors. Informal mentors are people that may never know that you look up to them and you look at them and think, I want to be like you someday in this particular aspect. Doesn't have to be every aspect, but a particular aspect. Informal mentor relationships are generally more observation based. They're less interactive or less mutually vulnerable. So you may actually have an informal mentor who's dead. You may have an informal mentor who you only know through their writings and books. You may have informal mentors that um, maybe you were in their class in school one day, and yeah, they were your teacher, but you never had a really close relationship, but you paid attention to how they interacted with others and took that in and internalized that. That's an informal mentor. And it's important to recognize those people in our lives as well. But more of what we want to talk about today is more of the formal mentors. The formal mentors are those relationships that we seek out intentionally. They're explicitly arranged and they're goal oriented. So they're relationships where you actually approach someone and say, "Hey, I really respect the way that you handle your finances, and that is something I want to learn and grow in. Would you be willing to mentor me or teach me how you have gone about arranging the finances in your life?" Or seeing someone that you go, you know what, I have a lot of respect for your marriage and the way you interact with your spouse. Um, I may or may not have had a good model in my parents, and I would really love to learn from you either before I'm in a serious relationship or now that I'm in one, and I really don't want to mess it up. So could you teach me? Could you mentor me? Could you be intentionally engaged with me in learning how to better my relationship skills? So these this formal piece has an intentionality to it. And you can think about it in terms of at least four different domains. Is there a personal character issue that you want to work on? So do you see somebody that you're like, you know what, you're really good at advocating for other people and asserting yourself in order to benefit others? And I want to learn how to do that. That's a personal character piece. Maybe you look at somebody and you go, you know what? You are very honest, and I struggle with being honest. I want to learn about that. Um, or I'm not real patient, and you seem to have unending patience. So can can I learn from you? So that's one category, a personal character kind of mentor. The other is a professional skill mentor. So this is where you ask to almost be more apprenticed of like, how do I um, develop this skill that's relevant to the job or the career that I'm pursuing? So is that about interviewing skills? Is that about networking? Is that um, more in terms of you're really good at your job, but you're not so good at the small talk and the informal parts of your job where you have to build relationships and they're professional relationships. So maybe you're seeking somebody out for that professional skill. Another category would be relational skills. So, like I mentioned before, that could be looking at someone and saying, you know what, you've done relationship well. You have a marriage that I respect, or you have a relationship with your kids that I really admire. Can I learn from you? I might have a lot of trust issues, and you seem to have worked through a lot of that. How did you do that? Can we do some life together and I learn from you? Another could be spiritual development, whether that's coming from a particular faith background or just learning to cultivate the part of you that is spiritual and needs to engage the other and the greater aspects of this world. So, personal, professional, relational, spiritual, these are all different domains that we may seek out mentorship in. And I would encourage you to be thinking about who in your life has mentored you in each of these four domains. Sometimes we look back and we realize that we've not had very good mentors, that what we've learned is pretty bad. Other times we look back and we go, I didn't realize it, but I was learning a lot from that person. And maybe it's beneficial to go back and thank them for that investment in your life, whether they knew they had it or not. In my life, I've had both informal and formal mentors that have significantly impacted my life. On an informal level, one of them for me was actually a book series that I read as a child and loved. I loved reading Little House on the Prairie, and Laura Ingalls Wilder was absolutely a character, a person that I looked at and went, I wish I had your courage. I wish I had your tenacity. Laura, and if you don't know the story, Laura would always, there was a boldness to her. And she often did the things that I thought, but was afraid to do because I didn't want to get in trouble. And she modeled for me a bit of what would life be like if I wasn't afraid? What would life be like if I wasn't trying to please everybody, but was acting out of my own true conviction and passion? And I didn't realize that that was the role she played in my life until probably about 5 years ago when I was walking with a student through a similar exercise and was like, oh, yeah, that's the role that she played for me. It's not a formal mentor because she was long dead before I read her stories and we never interacted directly together. But I still learned a lot there. I've had other mentors, informal mentors and professors and teachers who they were my teacher, but we didn't have a personal relationship, but I was watching and I was taking in how they interacted with other people, how they utilized the power that they had in a classroom for good and not to lord it over students. I also look at two mothers of friends of mine growing up as informal mentors. Two moms who had their homes open to us kids and who lived pretty openly with us as to what their lives were like and where they were struggling and where they were growing. And both of them modeled different relational skills as well as spiritual skills for me that I still appreciate today. But when it comes to formal mentors, I think those are the people that um, leave an even stronger mark sometimes because we've purposefully sought them out. We've seen something in them that was appealing to us, that drew us toward them. And I think of four in particular in my life at different stages. One was in college, one was, well, two were in grad school, and then one has been as an adult in a more kind of general life sense. When I was in college, I was really involved with a campus ministry that did a lot with what they called discipleship, which is basically spiritual mentoring. And the woman that I was paired with there was a great mentor to me. And honestly, I don't know that I learned a lot about her because her role of mentoring was to reflect back to me who she saw me to be and to affirm and encourage me to grow into those things. So, what I remember from that relationship was not magical words that she said or significant conversations, but it was more a sense of being seen, being valued, being encouraged, and being given the space to cultivate who I was made to be, without imposition, without expectation, but with freedom. I had another mentor when I was in grad school who was very much a spiritual mentor for me. We are very, very different in terms of our personalities, very different in terms of our life stage. I was in my early 20s, and she was in her late 60s, early 70s. We had had very different life experiences, and there was a wisdom and a grace to her that I could only hope to grow into. And in the midst of a very, very difficult time in my life, both physically and spiritually, she created a space of safety that modeled for me the ability to pursue my spiritual growth while in a place of great confusion and doubt and fear and hurt. And she didn't force me to have answers. She didn't force answers on me. She allowed me to question, to doubt, to cry, to fear, and to wrestle. And to wrestle in a way that my spirituality became more of my own. rather than what I thought was expected of me. Um, the steadfastness, the peace, and the grace that she embodied is something that I only hope that I can grow into as I continue on in life. The other mentor at that time was more of a professional mentor. She was a professor of mine in my grad program, and she also was in her late, probably mid 60s at that point. And she also did a wonderful job reflecting back to me who I was made to be. Um, but she cast vision for me as well. So she didn't just show me who I was in at that time. She cast vision for who I could be. Having walked ahead of me on the professional journey that I was on, she knew the path. She knew what that journey could look like. And while she did not impose who she was on me, she used her experiences to ask me really good questions, to leave room for me to step outside of boxes that I thought I was obligated to. She challenged me to not be stuck in old images of who I thought I was supposed to be. Um, she used humor and gentle confrontation um, and transparency of her own story to invite me into more. And she is still someone that 15 years later, I will still grab a happy hour with. I will still touch base with when there is something going on in life. She's retired, and um, our paths don't naturally cross, but she is someone I will intentionally seek out for her wisdom, her strength, and just um, the longevity of relationship that we have. A few years ago, I also then pursued a mentor through a woman who was closer to my peer. She was ahead of me substantially in different life experiences, and she was married. She had a teenage daughter, but she was only maybe, I think maybe 7 years older than I was. So age-wise, not significantly ahead of me, but life stage very ahead of me, as I was unmarried, had no kids, and I was deep into my professional journey. And for me, part of my journey was that um, I am a woman with a lot of personality traits that my culture will say is much more masculine. I'm more assertive, I'm very opinionated, I'm a natural leader, I'm pretty strong, I'm more of a thinker than a feeler, um, and I'm a very take charge person. And those are great strengths, but I was working at that time in my own process of how do I connect to the softer feminine side of me, where the more strong masculine side had been needed to be as successful as I was in my career. And I was trying to balance those parts of myself out. And I was looking around my community, and there's this woman that I had seen. We'd been at some events together, but I didn't know her very well, but we had friends in common. And she was from Guatemala. She and her husband and their daughter had immigrated years before. Um, and she was feisty, and she was feminine, and she had a lot of strength, but a lot of gentleness. And um, that combination was something that I knew I wanted, but I didn't know how to pursue and develop in my life. So I walked up to her one day and I said, "You don't know me very well. I think we've met once or twice, but um, here's what I'm working on. I want to learn how to engage the feminine in my life more and to integrate that with some of these harder edges that I've needed to cultivate for my professional success. But I want to be more balanced. And from what I know of you, you do this well. There's a strength to you, there is a graceful power to you, but there is also a soft femininity to you that I really respect. And I'm wondering if we can get together on a regular basis and I can just learn from you how you do life." And she looked at me with like the biggest eyes possible and she was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And I said, "Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me." I was like, "Because what I see in you just seems natural to you." And she's like, "Okay." And I said, "So I just want to learn from you and how you do life." She's like, "Oh, so you want to be friends?" And I was like, "Kind of." but with intention. Like, I want to learn from you. And she was like, so you just want to like hang out and do life together? And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And she's like, okay, well, we can do that. And over the next few years, we spent a time together, usually, once every couple weeks or once a month. I'd end up at her house and she'd be cooking dinner or getting ready for something for her family. And we just talk about life. And I got to watch and observe someone with a very different personality than me and how she did life and ask questions as they came up. And we've become more friends than a mentor relationship, but I still watch and I still learn. And she is still someone that I am attentive to how she does life because I really respect her and respect the differences that we have and appreciate getting to learn from someone who is ahead of me in certain things. I remember before I got married, shortly before I got married, I was at her house, or I was walking in to meet with her that day. I walk in her front door, and as I walk in her front door, her husband walks out the back door and slams the door. And I looked and I was like, "Everything okay?" She's like, "Yeah, it's probably good he's leaving. We just had a really bad fight." And I said, "Is it good? You guys okay?" And she goes, "Yeah, we'll be okay." And we started talking about that a little bit more, and I ended up thanking her, and I said, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "My family didn't do conflict well. They loved each other, but we didn't do conflict well. And so I've not really seen how couples navigate conflict because that's just not my parents either kind of pushed it under the rug or they argued in private." And I said, "What I really appreciate is that you guys, I got to walk in and see the end of something that probably wasn't real comfortable or pretty for you guys, but you just talked with me about how you guys will resolve that when you come back, when he comes back." And I said, "And I trust that. I know enough about your marriage and you guys to know that you guys fight hard, but you love hard and you work through it. And I know that there is a vulnerability there, and I appreciate you letting me see that." And she just kind of looked at me and laughed, and she's like, "Well, all right, well, if that's helpful for you, come on over anytime because we fight well." And that is mentorship. It is not just teaching and instructing, but it's living life together. It's being vulnerable enough to share your hard things as well as your successes. And I hope for each of you that you can have the boldness, the humility, the courage, and the curiosity to pursue people in your world for intentional mentorship. Let them speak into your life. Let them be the mirror that reflects back to you both the good and the bad of your own development. And let them imprint onto you the things that you need in order to grow more wholly into the person that you've been made to be. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and my story. And I wish you well and pray that you will have just incredible mentors in your life that enrich you in ways that you could never have imagined, to enable you to step into being a person even richer and fuller than you could have been on your own.